Grocery prices rose 3.1% in 2025. They are rising again in 2026. The USDA Economic Research Service said so directly. Fresh vegetables alone are projected to climb 7.8% this year. This is not speculation. This is the agency that tracks every dollar moving through the American food supply. Your garden is your hedge against that, but only if it is producing calories, not just color. Most gardens don't. A bed of salad greens and cherry tomatoes will not feed your family through winter. A courgette contains 17 calories per 100 grams. A lettuce leaf contains 15. The average home garden produces between 200 and 400 calories per day at peak season. One person needs 2,000 calories a day to survive. That gap is the problem nobody mentions. Here is why it exists. Ecology Action, the organization behind biointensive growing, one of the most rigorously tested food production systems ever developed, recommends that 60% of a food garden be planted to calorie and grain crops, 30% to high-calorie root crops, only 10% to everything else. Most home gardeners have this exactly backwards. 90% salad and tomatoes, 10% sustenance. That is not a food garden. That is a decorative food garden. Beautiful and nearly useless when the grocery bill becomes a problem. These 9 crops correct that ratio. High calorie, low maintenance. Proven across generations of people who grew food because their lives depended on it. Your grandparents knew every single one of them. Let's close the gap. Crop 1. Potato. The fastest crop on this list to close the calorie gap. A 100 square foot bed of potatoes, well tended, good variety, reasonable soil, yields approximately 90 pounds of tubers. 90 pounds of potatoes contains roughly 32,000 calories. Sit with that number. 32,000 calories from 100 square feet. That is 16 days of food for one adult from a patch of ground smaller than most garden sheds. Potatoes contain 77 calories per 100 grams. They are rich in potassium, vitamin C, and B vitamins. They are one of the few foods on Earth that a human being can survive on as a near-sole dietary source for extended periods. The nutritional completeness is documented. It is not folklore. Storage is where the potato earns its place in a year-round system. A good root cellar keeps potatoes 4 to 6 months. The Kennebec variety, favored by serious food gardeners for exactly this reason, has been stored successfully for up to 8 months under optimal conditions. Growing is forgiving. Plant seed potatoes in loose, well-drained soil. Hill the soil up around the stems as they grow. Keep the tubers covered from light. Water consistently. That is most of what the crop requires. 2 things that matter before you plant. First, variety. Waxy salad potatoes do not store. You want starchy varieties. Russets, Kennebec, King Edward. These are the storage varieties. The ones your grandparents grew when storage was the point. Second, rotation. Do not plant potatoes in the same ground 2 years running. Disease pressure builds in soil that grows the same crop repeatedly. Move the bed to a fresh location each season. One safety note, green or sprouted potatoes contain solanine, a compound that causes gastrointestinal distress in moderate quantities and more serious effects in large ones. Store away from light. Remove any green patches before cooking. Discard potatoes that have gone fully green. Standard kitchen practice, but worth stating clearly. 32,000 calories, 100 square feet. Start here. Crop 2, sweet potato. Not a variety of potato. A different plant entirely. A member of the morning glory family, not the nightshade family. Different growing season. Different climate. Different nutritional profile. And crucially, it fills the season gap the regular potato leaves open. Potatoes are a cool season crop. Sweet potatoes love heat. Plant them after your last frost when the soil is warm, and they will produce through the height of summer into early autumn, exactly when regular potatoes are finished. Between these two crops, you have calorie production running from early spring through late autumn without interruption. The calorie numbers are comparable: 86 calories per 100 grams. A single 10-foot row will typically yield 15 to 20 pounds of tubers. That is between 6,000 and 8,000 calories from a single row. The nutritional advantage over regular potatoes is significant. One medium sweet potato provides over 100% of the daily recommended vitamin A intake. That is not a minor benefit. Vitamin A deficiency becomes more common in older adults, quietly without obvious symptoms, in people who have lost their dark orange vegetables from the diet. Now here is what most gardeners miss entirely. The leaves are edible. The long, spreading vines that cover the ground all summer, those are nutritious greens you can harvest continuously without affecting tuber production. One plant, two harvests. Roots for calories and storage, leaves for fresh nutrition through the summer months. Curing is the step that makes long storage possible. After harvest, hold sweet potatoes at 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit with high humidity for 10 days. This heals any cuts in the skin and converts some of the starches to sugars, improving both flavor and shelf life. Properly cured and stored at 55 to 60 degrees, sweet potatoes keep for 6 to 10 months. Growing has one non-negotiable: warmth. Sweet potatoes are started not from seed, but from slips. Small rooted cuttings taken from an established tuber. Plant slips only after the last frost when the soil has warmed. Give them room to spread. They need minimal attention once established. In shorter seasons, choose early maturing varieties specifically. In long, hot seasons, the American South, the Mediterranean, tropical climates, this is one of the most productive calorie crops available. One plant, two harvests. 6 to 10 months of storage. Your grandparents grew this. Reintroduce it. Crop 3, dried beans. And the distinction I want to make immediately, because this is where most gardeners lose an enormous amount of caloric value from their growing space. Fresh green beans, 31 calories per 100 grams. Dried beans, the same plant, allowed to fully mature and dry in the vine, 1,600 calories per pound. Same plant, same seed. One decision about when to harvest. The difference is 50 times the caloric return. A 100 square foot planting grown to full maturity for drying will yield 4 to 6 pounds of dried beans. That is between 6,400 and 9,600 calories from a modest bed. Stored in an airtight container, they remain viable for 3 to 5 years. No refrigeration, no processing, no infrastructure beyond a jar with a lid. But the calorie number is only half the story. 1 cup of dried pinto beans provides approximately 670 calories and 41 grams of protein. 1 cup of dried black beans delivers similar figures. This is the crop that takes a calorie garden from functional to nutritionally complete. Calories without adequate protein are not enough. The body needs both. Dried beans solve both problems simultaneously. From the same bed, in the same season. Growing is straightforward. For maximum yield per square foot, grow pole beans rather than bush varieties. They produce more in less horizontal space by climbing vertically. Varieties worth growing for drying: Jacob's cattle, black turtle, good mother stallard, traditional pinto. Plant after the last frost. Provide sturdy vertical support. Water consistently. Do not harvest young. Leave the pods on the plant until they are papery and completely dry. In wet autumns, pull the entire plants and hang them in a dry shed to finish drying off the ground. Shell when fully dry. Store in airtight containers, 3 to 5 years of shelf life. No electricity, no freezer, no ongoing attention. Your grandparents kept dried beans in every pantry in the house. They were not being quaint. They were maintaining a caloric reserve that could feed the family through any disruption to the supply chain. Grocery prices rising 7.8% is a supply chain disruption in slow motion. Grow the beans. Crop 4, winter squash. The name tells you everything. It does not grow in winter. It grows in summer. It is named for when you eat it, because properly cured winter squash will sit on a shelf in a cool room and feed your family from October through February. No refrigeration, no electricity, no technology more sophisticated than a cool, dry shelf. That is what earned winter squash a place in every traditional food garden across Europe, North America, and Asia for thousands of years. Not its flavor, its ability to bridge the gap between the last autumn harvest and the first spring planting without any processing whatsoever. The calorie numbers by variety. Butternut, one of the most reliable for home gardens, provides approximately 45 calories per 100 grams raw. A single large butternut weighs 3 to 5 pounds. A well-grown vine in a productive season yields multiple fruits. One 10-foot row realistically produces 30 to 50 pounds. Between 6,000 and 10,000 calories stored on the vine, needing only a cool shelf to preserve. Here is what most gardeners throw away: the seeds. 1 cup of roasted squash seeds contains approximately 575 calories and a substantial protein content. Your grandparents did not discard 575 calories. They roasted them, salted them, and ate them. Save the seeds, roast them. That is not a bonus. That is part of the crop. Growing requires space. A single winter squash vine will spread 8 to 10 feet in any direction. The solution is vertical growing, training the vines up a sturdy trellis and supporting the developing fruits in a fabric sling. This converts a 10-foot horizontal sprawl into a vertical column and dramatically increases caloric yield per square foot. Curing is the single most important step between harvest and storage. After picking, hold squash at 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 14 days. This hardens the skin, seals any cuts, and extends storage life from weeks to months. Properly cured butternut keeps 3 to 6 months. Blue Hubbard, the largest and most productive variety, has been stored successfully for up to a year. Varieties to prioritize: butternut for flavor and reliability, Blue Hubbard for sheer volume and maximum storage life, Delicata for small space gardens and early maturity. Avoid ornamental varieties entirely. You are growing food, not decoration. Crop 5, corn, but not the corn you are thinking of. Sweet corn, the kind most home gardeners grow, is harvested young, contains roughly 90 calories per ear, does not dry, does not store, and has a harvest window measured in days. It is a summer treat It is not a food system. Field corn is a different crop entirely. Dried field corn contains approximately 100 calories per ounce. A 10 by 10 foot block will yield 10 to 15 pounds of dried corn. That is between 16,000 and 24,000 calories from 100 square feet. Stored in airtight containers with oxygen absorbers, properly dried corn kernels remain viable for 5 or more years. 5 years. That is not emergency food. That is a reserve that outlasts almost any disruption to the supply chain. The varieties to grow: Painted Mountain, Floriani Red Flint, Glass Gem, Bloody Butcher, heritage flour corns and flint corns, ancient varieties that have been drying, storing, and grinding into meal for thousands of years. A hand-operated grain mill converts them into cornmeal, the foundation of polenta, cornbread, corn porridge, corn tortillas. The entire traditional grain-based cuisine of the Americas was built on this one crop, one growing rule that is non-negotiable: plant in blocks, not rows. Corn is wind-pollinated. Pollen falls from the tassel at the top of the plant onto the silk of developing ears. In a single row, most pollen blows away. In a block, 4 plants by 4 plants or larger, pollen reaches neighboring plants reliably. Poor pollination means poorly filled ears. Poorly filled ears means low caloric yield. Plant in blocks. Space plants 12 inches apart in all directions. Full sun, water consistently. Leave on the stalk until the husks are fully brown and dry. Your grandparents grew this not as a summer treat, but as a winter staple. Ground into meal, it fed families through January when everything else was exhausted. Pause here. 5 crops in. The calorie foundation is laid: starchy roots, legumes, grain. What comes next fills the nutritional gaps and extends the system through every season, including winter. If this is landing differently from the gardening content you usually see, subscribe before we go further. Hit the bell. Because what the second half reveals changes how all 5 of these crops fit together. Stay with me. Crop 6, Jerusalem artichoke. This is the crop that surprises people, not because the calorie numbers are the highest on this list. They are not. Because of what it asks of you in return. Almost nothing. Jerusalem artichoke, also known as sunchoke, is a perennial. Planted once. It comes back every year without replanting, without much fertilizing, without much attention. It grows in poor soil that would defeat most other crops on this list. It tolerates partial shade. It produces in conditions where potatoes would fail. 1 cup of sliced Jerusalem artichoke provides 110 to 120 calories. Not potato-level density, but a planting left to its own devices expands year on year, producing food every autumn from that point forward without any additional investment of time, seed, or labor. It also grows to 10 feet tall, which means it provides windbreak, partial shade, and structural shelter for the smaller crops around it. It is not just a calorie crop. It is garden infrastructure that also produces food. One honest caution: Jerusalem artichokes contain inulin rather than starch as their primary carbohydrate. Inulin feeds beneficial gut bacteria, a genuine benefit. It is also, for people eating it in large quantities for the first time, the cause of significant digestive discomfort. Introduce it gradually. Start with small portions. Give your gut several weeks to adjust before eating it as a staple. Harvest from late autumn through winter. The tubers improve in flavor after the first frost. Cold converts some of the inulin to fructose. They do not store well once dug. Leave them in the ground and dig as needed. The soil is the storage. Plant once. Harvest every year, almost no maintenance. In a calorie garden, that is an extraordinary return on a single afternoon's work. Crop 7. Amaranth. Most gardeners in the English-speaking world have grown this as an ornamental. The dramatic red and gold seed heads earn it a place in flower borders. As a food crop, it has a history stretching back 5,000 years and a nutritional profile that puts most garden vegetables to shame. 1 cup of amaranth grain provides approximately 250 calories. Complete protein, all 9 essential amino acids. More protein than most grains. Gluten-free, rich in magnesium, iron, and phosphorus. The Aztec civilization grew it as a primary calorie crop alongside corn and beans. Nutritional science has since confirmed that combination provides a remarkably complete dietary foundation. The Spanish colonial authorities understood exactly how important it was. One of their first actions upon arriving in Mexico was to ban amaranth cultivation. They recognized that the crop was foundational, that without it, the population's caloric independence was compromised. That is not a plant to overlook. Growing is straightforward. Amaranth thrives in heat, tolerates drought, grows in poor soil, reaches 6 feet in a good season. One plant in ideal conditions can produce a pound or more of seed. Harvest when the seed heads are fully dry. Pull a paper bag over the head and shake. Most of the seed collects itself. Rub the heads between your palms over a bucket to thresh. Winnow lightly to remove chaff. The seed cooks in 20 minutes, similar to quinoa. It can be popped like popcorn, ground into flour, cooked as a hot cereal. The leaves are edible all season. Young amaranth leaves are used across Central America, South Asia, and Africa as a cooked green, treated exactly like spinach. 1 plant, a grain harvest, and a continuous supply of fresh greens. Grow it. It earns its space. Crop 8. Sunflower. Not for decoration, not for cut flowers, for seeds. 1 cup of sunflower kernels provides 270 to 300 calories. Those calories come with 25 grams of fat and 10 grams of protein. The fat is predominantly polyunsaturated, the kind the body uses for cellular function, hormone production, and brain health. Here is what most calorie garden guides miss entirely. Fat is the macronutrient most people underestimate in a food system built around storable crop. Calories from carbohydrates alone, from potatoes, beans, corn, squash, do not fully satisfy hunger. The body needs fat for satiety. Without it, you can eat sufficient calories and still feel chronically hungry. Sunflower seeds are one of the most concentrated sources of plant-based fat a home garden can produce, and they require almost nothing to grow. 1 large heritage sunflower plant produces approximately a quarter pound of seeds per head. A row of 10 plants yields 2 to 3 pounds of seed, between 4,000 and 5,000 calories. Packaged by the plant in a form that stores at room temperature for 12 months or longer. Growing is minimal. Full sun only, this crop does not tolerate shade. Direct sow after the last frost. Space heritage varieties 18 to 24 inches apart. Water through the growing season. Harvest when the back of the seed head turns from green to yellow-brown and seeds pull easily from the head. Cut and hang in a dry ventilated space for 2 weeks. Seeds rub out easily by hand. One final note: the spent heads draw goldfinches and insect-eating birds into the garden. Your grandparents understood that a garden attracting the right birds is a garden with lower pest pressure. Nothing from a sunflower plant needs to go to waste. Crop 9. parsnip. Left until last deliberately, because of all 9 crops on this list, parsnip occupies the most important and distinctive position in a year-round food system. It is the winter crop. Parsnips survive frost. They survive snow. They survive temperatures that would destroy every other crop on this list. And they do not merely survive, they improve. Cold converts the starch in the root to sugar. A parsnip that has been through a hard frost is noticeably sweeter than one harvested in autumn. The cold makes it better. 100 grams provides approximately 75 calories. Not potato-level density, but a well-grown root weighs 200 to 400 grams, making one root between 150 and 300 calories. A bed of parsnips provides harvestable food from November through March. Those are the months when every other calorie crop on this list has either been harvested and stored, or has not yet been planted. Parsnips fill a gap that nothing else will touch. Growing requires attention to one critical step: seed freshness. Parsnip seed loses viability rapidly. Old seed or improperly stored seed will not germinate reliably. Buy fresh seed every year from a reputable supplier. Sow directly. Parsnips dislike transplanting. Thin to 6 inches apart. Keep the bed weed-free until seedlings establish. Germination is slow and young plants are easily overwhelmed. After that, almost nothing. They grow through summer slowly without drama. By October, they are ready. By December, after the frosts have worked on them, they are exceptional. Leave them in the ground. Harvest as needed through winter. The soil is the storage. Your grandparents grew parsnips not because they were fashionable. They grew them because they produced calories in the months when nothing else would. When February arrived and the food needed stretching until spring, the parsnips were still in the ground, still improving, still waiting. That quiet winter reliability is worth more than any summer spectacle. 9 crops, but not a list, a system. Each crop fills a different piece of the year. Each fills a different piece of the nutritional picture. Grown together in the right proportions, they do not just produce calories. They produce a calendar of food that covers every month with something a human body actually needs. Here's how the calendar works. Spring. Parsnips still in the ground from autumn. Last of the stored potatoes and winter squash from the previous season. Sweet potato slips going in. Beans being direct sown. Amaranth seedlings going out. Summer. Sweet potato leaves providing continuous fresh greens. Corn growing in its block. Winter squash vines spreading and flowering. Sunflowers tracking the sun. Jerusalem artichokes building their tuber mass underground. Autumn, the great harvest. Potatoes lifted and stored. Winter squash cured and shelved. Corn dried on the stalk. Beans shelled and jarred. Sunflower heads cut and hanging. Sweet potato roots lifted and cured. Winter. Parsnips in the ground, improving with every frost. Jerusalem artichokes ready for digging. Dried beans, corn, and squash feeding the family from the storage shelf. No gap. 12 months of calories, 9 crops. Now the numbers behind the system. Ecology Action's research, field tested across decades, internationally replicated, establishes that 4,000 square feet of calorie-focused growing space can produce a nutritionally complete diet for one adult per year. A family of 4, approximately 16,000 square feet, 1/3 of an acre. The allocation, 60% to calorie and grain crops, corn, dried beans, amaranth, sunflowers, 30% to calorie root crops, potatoes, sweet potatoes, parsnips, Jerusalem artichokes, 10% to everything else, Most home gardeners are running this at May 5th, 1990. 5% calorie crops, 5% root crops, 90% salad and tomatoes. That is not a food garden. That is a decorative food garden, beautiful and nearly useless when the grocery bill becomes a problem. These 9 crops, planted in the right ratio, in the right space, change that calculation completely. My grandfather never called it a survival garden. He called it insurance. He grew potatoes and beans and winter squash and corn every year without fail, not because he was anxious, but because he understood that a garden without calories is a decoration. He did not need a USDA report to tell him food prices could go up any time, for any reason. He knew the hedge against that was not in a savings account. It was in the ground. The gardeners in 2026 putting these crops back into their plots are not preppers. They are not anxious. They are rational. They have looked at the data. Food prices up 3.2% year on year. Fresh vegetables projected to rise 7.8% this year. And they have made a calculation. The seed costs pennies. The ground is already there. The crops your grandparents grew are still the same crops. 9 crops, a season's work, a shelf full of food. That is the honest root of this. Not trend, not anxiety. An honest calculation about what grows, what stores, and what feeds a family when the numbers at the bottom of the receipt keep climbing. I'm Elias Ford. This is The Honest Root. See you in the next one.